Starting off Unit 2, assignment number 1, we read an article that explained the potential of internet-based learning by describing 5 fundamental principles of learning. We learned that internet-based higher education can lead to better mastery of material, can optimize performance, deepen memory, promote critical thinking skills, and it can enhance writing skills. I would say that I agree with all of these. I think that internet-based learning is a very accessible way to go back and engage with material. So it makes sense to me that it would lead to better mastery and deepen memory because, just having access to those things and being able to read them one more time or watch those videos one more time or find a new assignment to do is always a good way to help yourself learn something. Of the 5 topics that were discussed though, I decided to focus on how internet-based learning has the ability to enhance writing skills. Because most internet-based classes require students to type up their answers rather than, directly speaking or raising a hand, it seems to me that it can be easily assumed that the extra typing time that we spend really does improve the ability to write rather than, what speaking would do, which makes sense, I think. Just putting more words down and reading more words is always going to help your reading and writing ability. As to the reason why this principle resonated with me the most, I would say that that's because, as it actually says in the article, writing ability is considered a highly valuable trait for any potential employee to possess. And we do spend a good amount of time writing just in our daily lives as students. But any opportunity to perform more is a good chance to realize flaws with old techniques and to improve upon them, expanding your vocabulary and working on your grammar and things like that. Writing specifically too is a skill that is really best to improve, I think, through the act of repetition. You can learn more about certain rules of grammar and things like that, and that's absolutely true. But I just think personally that when it comes to kind of figuring out your own style and figuring out how you like to convey information, that just doing it over and over again, giving yourself that chance to work through it is what I find to be the most satisfying and the most effective. And just in general, the more creating and reflecting that is done by students, the more they can expect to learn, I think, because, the more work that you've done, it's the more you can kind of reflect on and actually sort of give an understanding to and think about in order to sort of realize what these principles really mean in practice. Writing for an online course is also interesting in a unique way because most of what is written does kind of enter a public space, like a sort of digital classroom space where other students can read what you've written and respond to it, leave comments, and then you can go back and read those comments. It's all a very kind of cyclical process where anything kind of can go to someone else and then come back to you, which is super good because having opportunities to reflect like that is also very important. I made sure to discuss all of these things in my discussion posts for the Unit 2 Assignment 1 post, but after this I was done with Assignment 1. Moving on to Assignment 2, we first read Jeffrey Young's 2010 article, A Self-Appointed Teacher Runs a One-Man Academy on YouTube. And this reading gave just a brief little background about Khan Academy, which has grown significantly since 2010. I think a lot of students are familiar with it. But basically, it's like a website or an app that you can go to where you can learn a bunch of different topics that are typically taught in schools. The one difference being that it's more kind of independently paced and you're able to learn these things online from online teachers. It's an incredible resource, and I know I've used it plenty in my own life. I've had classes actually where the teacher recommends we go on the website and they give us different assignments to do there. But it's a great way to learn different bits of knowledge from kind of different class related things, but instead of having to actually attend a class or show up in person, you have the opportunity to work on these things online, which gives an incredible amount of freedom to students. So that's definitely a useful tool. And then secondly, we read the abstract of Garcia et al.'s 2022 article, TikTok as a Knowledge Source for Programming Learners, a New Form of Nano Learning. This article linked to a short little abstract from a study that looked at how learning occurs on TikTok. Even though it's kind of meant to be like an entertainment site, what they found was that a lot of the videos that are uploaded to this video sharing site are about different kind of tips and tricks or teaching how to do certain things. And in the article, they state that they actually discovered a substantial amount of content for an engagement surrounding programming learners, actually. So like computer programming, which is super interesting because if you think about the original purpose of the site, it is about like kind of entertainment and just letting people post videos of themselves. So the idea that it branches out into sort of more of like a learning based platform for something like programming is super cool to see because it really does show kind of the flexibility of the platform. And then after that, we read an article by Greg Jarboe from 2014 titled How a DIY YouTube Video Tutorial Saved Me $700. And this video is kind of more of like an anecdotal story from the author where he talks about how at one point in the past his washer in his basement started leaking. And he mentioned how kind of normally it would be typical to maybe have it replaced or hire someone to come in and replace it. But once he saw the potential cost of having to replace it, he wasn't really wanting to go that route. So he decided to turn to YouTube to find different videos to kind of figure out how to repair it. And in the end, he was able to repair it, and he does believe that he was able to save himself several $100s, as the title of the article suggests, which was kind of just a cool like first-hand example of how, like doing the work yourself and using YouTube as a tool for learning does have real benefits. And it doesn't have to be about like teaching ourselves to like learn a different language or something extreme like that. It can be something more simple and basic, like just fixing an appliance or doing something around the house. It's still a very effective method and absolutely is a tool that humans can use. We then read an article by Travis Sawchik, 2017, about a professional baseball player called Eric Thames and the Transformative Power of Boredom. This article is kind of just a little rundown of how a former baseball player who was in South Korea learned to kind of manage his boredom that he had during his free time. He talks about how he was very like painfully bored at the time, and so he took the opportunity to go online to read stuff. He did a lot of things with that time. He read different things, he meditated, he focused on becoming more mindful. He said he didn't want the time to be about like having fun necessarily. He wanted to kind of read about stuff that gave him more perspective. He then went on to find more YouTube videos of a former player called Barry Bonds hitting plenty of home runs. And he watched these videos to kind of get a bigger idea of how to focus on like strike zones and like good hitting practices. I'm not a big baseball fan myself, so some of the language goes a little over my head, but basically it seems like he kind of used this opportunity to grow himself as a baseball player and like fight his boredom at the same time. So just being like productive and finding creative ways to sort of spend the time. Then there's a couple more little readings. There's a screenshot of a tweet where Paula Niedenthal talks about how her senior age mom better learned to roll lefty through the internet. And then we also see how one professor, Professor Russell Poldrack, used YouTube to learn how to play the guitar better. And then finally, we had an excerpt from the Pew Research Center's 2018 report, and it talked about how many will use YouTube to find like different kind of how-to lessons and just teaching themselves different ways to sort of accomplish tasks and kind of grow skills, similarly to a lot of the other readings we saw for this assignment number 2. So there's definitely a theme, I would say, for this assignment where we're focusing on like how the internet can be used to pick up skills and kind of accomplish different things, which is absolutely something I believe in. I think the internet is a great way to develop yourself as a person and kind of master different skills, or even just to get like a basic level set of learning. I think it can really be used either way. After this came a fun project for us. We were tasked with going on the internet and finding different kind of tutorial videos and then learning skills from them. So we were told to find 2 new skills from different online sources. So I immediately went to YouTube because it's the platform that I believe myself to be most familiar with. And I learned, first of all, how to clean the smudges off of like a disc, so like a CD or a Blu-ray or DVD. I like to listen to CDs a lot, so this was something that I could apply to my own life. Just because I like to listen to them all the time, and sometimes having them skip can be a pain. So learning how to clean them was fun. Basically, it's really simple. You just take like a damp paper towel and you just like start from the inside of the disc and you wipe outwards, and it's supposed to kind of clean the different little bits of dust or fingerprints off, which was super helpful. And then secondly, more just for fun, I learned how to fold an origami cat. I have done a little bit of origami in the past as a kid, but I've never been like good at it or very proficient. So I mean, it was just kind of fun to take a minute to fold some paper around and just try and do something fun with it. And then afterwards, when I was done, I just set it up in my room. And it actually sat there for a while. But that was definitely fun. I appreciated that. After that, it was just a matter of linking the different videos that I learned from to my discussion post, and then also discussing kind of how my videos and my projects actually related back to a lot of the articles and the tweets that we looked at for this unit. And then I also made sure to take photos of my projects as I was doing them. So I've got a picture in my post of me wiping down a CD, and I've got another one of my cat that I'm folding right in front of the video. But otherwise, that was it for assignment 2. So it was time to move on to assignment 3 after this. Starting off with assignment 3, I went back to assignment 1 actually, and I read all of the discussion posts that were made by other students for the Unit 2 assignment 1 post about the different principles of learning on which the internet capitalizes. It was kind of fun to get an idea of what other skills people believe to be the most useful, because I know originally I talked about writing skills, but it was interesting seeing different perspectives on what people believe to be like some of the most valuable skills. The first post that I decided to comment on was by Kaiying. She said that the principle of learning that she chose to focus on was that internet based higher education can lead to better mastery. I like this principle quite a bit because I do believe that internet based learning, I mean, like a lot of learning really, can lead to better mastery of material just because you're getting more opportunities to kind of go back and interact with it. But I think what makes internet based learning special is that you can really do it at your own pace, you know? Like if you're doing it in person, you might have to take someone's time to ask them a question, or like to see a firsthand demonstration might be difficult if it's like a complicated process. But if it's internet based, I mean, you can read those articles over and over again, or you can watch those videos over and over again. So definitely I think having a chance to engage with the material at your own pace is what makes internet based learning so good for mastery, I would say. Next, I decided to comment on Taylor's post, and she said that she chose the principle of learning through shorter, more frequent practice rather than like doing longer practice and less often. Just because it has been shown that even if we're taking smaller moments to engage with material, if we're doing that more often and spreading it out over a greater amount of time, that has been shown to be better for learning than like trying to sit with the material all together all at once, like maybe, commonly thought of as like cramming before a test or before a big project. Like we know that scientifically that that's not as effective. So I think that was a fun one to read about too. And I think it is pretty applicable as well because I think we've all had a decent amount of exposure to like procrastination, either we've done it ourselves or we've seen it happen in other people, and sometimes it can be frustrating because maybe we don't want other people to do it, or maybe we feel like we have no choice ourselves. So, but just like being mindful of getting little bits of learning across a greater amount of time is definitely a better idea when it's possible, and we should always try and kind of do that rather than trying to throw it all together at the very end. But after making those 2 posts on those comments, I was done with assignment number 3. So after that, it was time to move on to assignment number 4. For assignment number 4, I started by reading an excerpt from Alex Suskind's 2014 15 Years After Napster article, How the Music Service Changed the Industry. Reading this article kind of just gave us a chance to learn about Napster, which was an old website that was commonly used to download and listen to music in a digital format. We definitely still have music in digital formats today. I think we most commonly use like Apple Music or Spotify or even YouTube to listen to music. Those are the bigger platforms today, but I mean, Napster was definitely like kind of a big thing at the time. It was one of the first big platforms to really be able to sell music to people. Um, but we also learned that the website eventually went down due to a lot of the lawsuits that surfaced claiming that copyrights had been infringed upon. I mean, there is a lot of intellectual property that goes into music, a lot of different creations. So, I mean, just kind of the way they handled it was not super careful, and it definitely showed, obviously, with all these lawsuits. I know that music services today are a lot better about this because they do make sure to secure rights before they have like artists' works posted up on their sites. I know that a lot of Spotify stuff is actually posted directly by users. Like it's not like someone's taking it and putting it up and selling it. The only way you're going to be able to listen to a band is if they have a Spotify account and they post their material and it's there for you to listen to. So definitely I would say services of today are better about protecting copyrights and not infringing upon artists, which is definitely a good thing because I mean they deserve to have those rights. They deserve to get, like money for their labor. So that's definitely a good thing. After this, we read an article that talked a little bit more about the change in the music industry and how Napster kind of went under. And then we also learned about Introduction to Artificial Intelligence, which was an online course that was from Stanford, and it was taught by some of their professors, Peter Norvig and Sebastian Thrun. It actually managed to attract more than 160,000 potential students, and of those students, 23,000 completed it. And this was kind of one of the first instances of, on a large scale, like qualified professional professors going online and teaching their materials, and then having different students around the globe actually engage with that material and learn from it. Up until this point, online learning was definitely something that was possible, but it kind of took place more as like YouTube videos being uploaded or certain articles being posted that students could learn from. This was one of the first times where it was actually put in a more professional manner, almost something that kind of mirrored like a classroom, as like really engaging kind of educational content arose. From this article, we were expected to find 3 points that were made that astounded us the most, and then we were supposed to explain why they astounded us, and then we were also told to give exact quotes from the article that represented these facts. But anyhow, the 3 points from the article that I was astounded by were quite interesting. The first one was that very few students are actually given first class education experiences in the first place. One of the concerns of the article is that online learning would give kind of these second rate educations to students compared to in person teaching. And while there is definitely a lot of engagement that you can get out of being like in person in a class, the harsh reality is that the well, as they state in the article, like they're not trying to replace the learning that happens at like Harvard or MIT, but it is important to consider that there are a lot of colleges that are not like on that level. A lot of colleges that teach in a more basic manner where budgets are lower and definitely like the quality of the teaching is lower. And they say that online learning at like a college level is kind of more so meant to supplement these sort of levels of learning. They talk about how we place a lot of emphasis on the abilities of these top colleges, but a quote they share in the article is that the top 50 colleges of the world only educate about 3% of college students. So, if you think about it, making a tool to replace this top kind of level doesn't even really make that much sense because you are at that point only making a tool for 3% of college students. So, working down to like a lower level kind of makes more sense because it's more feasible. It's a more useful product that could actually be considered something that could potentially stand in rather than something that will like have to really, really compete with very well paid professors and very just good staff. The next point that I found really interesting was that online classes are capable of attracting thousands of students. The quote they share is that the year before this article was posted, they say last year, Introduction to Artificial Intelligence, an online course from Stanford taught by Peter Norvig and Sebastian Thrun, attracted 160,000 potential students. This is an insane number if you think about it because your average lecture hall might hold like 200, 300, maybe 400 students. And the average professor, is probably going to be teaching a couple of class sections at a time. But even then, that does not come close to teaching 160,000 students in a year. That's more than like entire universities. And, all these students were only being taught by just a couple of professors. That's an insane number. It's hard to really connect with your professor when there's that much of sort of a disconnect and imbalance between the student count and the professor count. There are definitely ways you can work around this though by hiring more staff to kind of answer questions, but even so, just being able to reach that many students with maybe one video or one class in the first place is absurd and it's incredible. And then the third point that I found interesting was that college is simply becoming too expensive and an alternative method becomes more desirable every year. As a college student myself, I can certainly agree with this. I'm like doing in-state intuition, so I'm already getting a discount, but even so, I feel like I'm paying an absurd amount for college, and unfortunately, that's just kind of the way it is. Um, in Madison especially, college is expensive, rent is expensive, parking is expensive. There's just so much kind of money that has to be thrown into the system for it to work, and it makes sense that as these prices would rise, that cheaper alternatives like online learning become significantly more kind of preferable. The quote that they share for this point is that once you imagine educating 1,000 people in a single class, it becomes clear that open courses, even in their nascent state, will be able to raise quality and improve certification faster than traditional institutions can lower cost or increase enrollment. It does make sense that these physical institutions like colleges would have a hard time reducing their rates because they are about investing in students, and bringing in the best professors and making new buildings to learn in and, hiring good staff. So it is, in a sense, understandable why it'd be hard for them to lower prices. But at the end of the day, the point that I've gotten to is very disagreeable for some. So it makes sense that people would turn to online learning as a way to combat this cost. That was everything I had for assignment 4, though, so it was time to move on to assignment 5. Assignment 5 was an interesting one because we started to learn about our chat groups that we would have. Chat groups are also like a reoccurring theme in this course. Basically, the idea is that every week you meet with your chat group for an hour and you discuss a sort of a set of topics or kind of learnings that you had for that day. This was an interesting way to kind of chat directly with other students. So normally it was a matter of having 3 people in a group and you just kind of talk to each other through like a chatting service. Like we use Google Chat, I think it's called. But basically it was a cool like kind of in the moment way to talk to people rather than asynchronously like leaving a post and then coming back to it later. So this was definitely a fun new kind of way to interact with material. But first I found out which group I was in. For this first project, I was put in the hashtags group Y. I was in a group with Lucas and Angelica, and we were together for, I want to say, about the first 7 to 8 weeks of class, and then we went to switch after that. But basically, we got pretty familiar with just talking to each other and, working together when discussing the different material. But yeah, after I found out what group I was in, it was really just a matter of contacting them through email and then finding different times to meet. These usually changed every week, but they kind of fell around like midweek lunchtime, I want to say. Um, it's not super important. We just kind of jumped around to whatever worked for everyone. But yeah, it was super cool. We determined who should set up the group chat space, and then we did that. And then once we kind of had that chat space set up, we sort of just kind of waited until we actually had our first project. In the meantime, we also made sure to learn like what the best way was to participate in a group chat. We took this from the course How To on the main website, because in this course, one of the things that had to be done post every group meet was a PDF summary had to be posted. That was kind of like a transcript of the entire meeting or just a log of all the chats that were sent. And the only way this information could be taken was if one of the people in the chat had been working from their laptop. So we just kind of had to learn about why it was important to make sure someone was on their laptop so we could actually pull this information and then post it to the group canvas. But yeah, that was pretty much it for this assignment. Then it was just a matter of making a discussion post where I kind of talk about everything that I mentioned. What group we're in, who's responsible for setting up the chat space, who is going to use Chrome on their laptop, and then just our general meet time too. And this was pretty typical. We did this about every week, talking about when we want to meet and things like who's going to use the laptop. So it was just kind of more a matter of like procedural work. But otherwise, that was it for assignment 5 of the week. So after that, we moved on to assignment number 6. For assignment number 6, it was a matter of going back to the course review sheet. And this week, for the course review, we talked about 5 fundamental principles of learning on which internet-based higher education capitalizes, as we learned from the Unit 2 Assignment 1 post when we read the professor's Why Internet-Based Education article. And here I repeated the 5 principles. I talked about how internet-based higher education can lead to better mastery, can optimize performance, deepen memory, promote critical thinking, and can enhance writing skills. These were all the same topics that I talked about earlier in the Unit 2 Assignment 1 post, so um, this was just kind of a good chance to go back over those little topics and refresh myself about what they meant. And then also starting this week, because it was Unit 2, this meant that I also had to go back and refill in the Unit 1 area. This is something we do every week just because it's a good chance to kind of get that repetition in that we talked about, just in, like how it helps learning. So I made sure to go back to Unit 1 and talk about again the 9 technologies or pastimes that sort of created kind of a moral panic prior to the internet and how kind of they could be comparable to the moral panic that surrounds the internet now. Just back in Unit 1 assignment number 6. But then after this, I made sure to read through the term project instructions, and I also made sure to look at the term project timeline and the term project grading rubric. All of it seemed pretty standard. The information seemed to be laid out pretty well, so I didn't feel the need to talk to the professor about any of it because I felt pretty confident in, my understanding of what was expected of us and what the project should look like. So I just kind of started to prepare myself mentally for the task. I started thinking about what I wanted the term project to look like. I wasn't sure yet if I wanted to do like a whole project that would span the length of the course that kind of gave a little bit of insight into all the assignments and all the work that we did, or if I wanted to do like a deeper dive type work yet into like a specific piece of course material. So I figured I'd kind of leave it open and just think about it at a later time more so. But with that being said, I typed up my kind of little summary about maybe what I was thinking of doing, and I took my PDF of my course review, and I uploaded those both to the submission for Unit 2 assignment number 6. But then once that was done, I was done with assignment number 6 and Unit 2 for this week. So after that, it was time to move on to Unit number 3.